In your notes, please write down 3-13, interpreting bar graphs. If I'm going too fast for you at any time, you can pause this video, or I believe you can also adjust the playback speed, but go ahead and pause and replay anything you do not understand. Write in your notes 3-13 and interpreting bar graphs. This right here is a bar graph. It is useful for comparing information. It's called a bar graph because it displays bars to show the information. Whenever you're trying to understand any kind of display of data, you really need to read all of the headings and see how all of the axes are labeled and read any description that's given to you. So here we have a description. In a survey conducted by a sports magazine, fans rated the sports they enjoyed watching most. The results of the survey are shown in the bar graph to the right. Pay attention to the title. Sports fans' favorite sports. If you want to write this information in your notes, you may do that. If you want to guess the answers yourself before I tell them to you, pause the video and write them down. The first part you are not required to write in your notes. So question 1 says, what information is shown on the horizontal axis? Horizontal is this direction, left and right. This is the horizontal axis. The information shown there would be the names of the sports. Notice how they labeled them, and then they listed them. Football, baseball, basketball, tennis, and ice hockey. That is the horizontal axis. Then the next part of the question asks, what do you see on the vertical axis? Vertical means straight up and down, so this is the vertical axis. And the answer to that would be the number of fans. Notice they're counting by hundreds here on the vertical axis. I think you guys are good enough to know the answers to question 2. What is the most preferred sport? So the most preferred one is the one with the highest bar. Now these two are pretty close, but do you see that they're just a little bit below 600, whereas this one actually goes all the way to 600. So football would be the most preferred sport, and you can tell because the bar associated with football is the tallest bar. Here's another bar graph. It's a different kind of bar graph called a double bar graph. It's called a double bar graph because the bars come in pairs. These two go together, these two go together, and so on. So that's a double bar graph. Also, don't be bothered by the fact that the bars themselves are horizontal on this graph. I think you're used to seeing them displayed vertically. It's just kind of turned on its side, and that's a perfectly legitimate way for a bar graph to be. Again, whenever you're trying to interpret a graph, you need to see if you can understand what the information is that it's trying to display. The title's always helpful. Remember, when you make a bar graph, to always include a title too. It says American League pennant winners. And that sort of assumes that you know what that is. And if you don't know what that is, you would need to ask somebody so that you can understand the graph better. The American League is part of our Major League Baseball system. It's kind of one half of it. And the pennant winner is the team that won that part of Major League Baseball. So the pennant winner won the American League. On the horizontal axis, we've got numbers going from 0 to 100, and those numbers represent games. Then over here we've got team and year of pennant win. So in 1968, the Detroit Tigers won the American League pennant. In 1967, the Boston Red Sox. In 1966, Baltimore won, and in 1965, Minnesota won. Okay. So then what the graph is telling you have to notice the key over here too, that the blue bar represents wins and the red bar represents losses. So in 1968, Detroit won 100 games and Detroit lost 60 games. Now that kind of makes sense since they did win the pennant, that they won quite a few more games than what they lost. Then this next section shows that in 1967, Boston won. Well, how many games is that going to be? Between 90 and 100. Not halfway there, not halfway between. It's less than 95. I'd go with 92 games that Boston won in 1967. All right, I think this double bar graph is a little bit difficult to understand. Let's see if you can answer the questions. Question 3 says, what information is compared on the double bar graph? So what's being compared here is the wins and the losses of teams that won the American League pennant from 1965 to 1968. Now, number 4, I think that's an interesting question. Why is the horizontal scale broken between 0 and 50? This is a good question. What happened to 10, 20, 10, 20, 30, and 40 in here? It goes from 0 to 50, and then we go by tens after that. So the reason that they break the scale like that is, could you imagine if they squeezed in 10, 20, 30, and 40, how wide this graph would become? It would take up more paper. And a lot of times they do that. And it's okay in this case because there's no important information in there. Nobody had fewer than 50 wins or losses. And so that's considered all okay, although it can be a little bit misleading. Then number 5 asks you to tell what does blue represent, what does red represent. I think that's pretty clear. Blue represents wins and red represents losses.